What happens when the party of the year becomes a public execution? Ella Blackwood, the perfect wife, was about to find out. Her husband brought his mistress, Selina, to their family's biggest charity gala. And Selina wasn't just there to mingle. She was there to replace Ella. In front of hundreds of their city's most powerful people, Selina cornered her and spat the 5 words that stopped the music. "You are just a servant." She was wrong. She had no idea who was really watching and what was waiting inside a simple manila folder that would change everything, forever. The Willow Creek estate was not a home. It was a statement. Set on 300 acres of meticulously manicured land in Greenwich, Connecticut, the staggering limestone mansion was a monument to Blackwood family power. It was featured in Architectural Digest twice and had a name, not just an address. And for Ella Blackwood, it was the most beautiful, isolating prison in the world. Today it was a hive of activity. Dozens of catering staff, florists and technicians bustled under Ella's calm direction. Tonight was the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala, the social event of the season, and as Jonas Blackwood's wife, Ella was its unelected, unpaid and unthanked general. She stood by the French doors overlooking the rear gardens, where a marquee the size of a football field was being given its finishing touches. She wore simple linen trousers and a white silk blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, practical bun. Her only jewelry was the wedding band that felt more like a shackle, and a simple, vintage silver locket she'd had since she was a girl. A stark contrast to the Blackwood uniform of glittering diamonds. "The peonies are clashing with the hydrangeas on table 12, Mrs. Blackwood," a frantic coordinator whispered, holding up a tablet. Ella didn't even look. "It's fine, Mark. The lighting in the marquee will be dim and rose-tinted. It will mute the colors. Just ensure the stems are cut." "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood." He scurried away, marveling at her composure. Her composure was a shield, honed to perfection over 5 years of marriage. She had been Ella Sanchez, a head librarian at the New York Public Library, when she met Jonas Blackwood. He had been a whirlwind of charm, power, and overwhelming force. He hadn't just dated her, he had acquired her, seeing her quiet intelligence and gentle nature as a soothing balm to his chaotic, aggressive life. She had been in love with his potential. He had been in love with her pedigree, not of money but of class. She was something he could never be, genuine. The genuineness had worn off, for him, about 6 months after the wedding. For her, the love had died a slower death, 1,000 tiny cuts, the missed dinners, the business trips to St. Bart's, the cold, dismissive way he spoke to her when they were alone, and, for the last year, the blatant, shameless affair. A heavy, measured tread sounded on the marble floor behind her. She didn't need to turn. "The gardens look impeccable, Ella." Ella allowed herself a small, real smile and turned to face her father-in-law, Arthur Blackwood. Arthur was the true patriarch. He was the one who had built the empire that Jonas was now so carelessly coasting on. In his late 60s, he still possessed a razor-sharp intellect and an intimidating presence, dressed today in a bespoke Savile Row suit, even on a Saturday. He was the only person in the mansion who saw her. "Thank you, Arthur. I was hoping you'd approve. We're auctioning off a private tour of your famed orchid greenhouse for the Children's Hospital Fund." Arthur nodded, his eyes scanning the lawn. "A good idea. Jonas, of course, wanted to auction off one of his sports cars. Tacky." His gaze softened as it landed on her. "You, my dear, are the only thing of taste my son ever managed to acquire." It was a compliment, but it landed with a familiar sting. Acquire. "Speaking of," Arthur continued, his voice dropping, "my wife Margaret is upset. She feels the chosen shade of blue for the marquis is morose. Ella sighed. Margaret Blackwood, her mother-in-law, was a woman composed entirely of passive-aggressive sighs and veiled insults. She had never forgiven Ella for not coming from a name family. It's midnight sky, Arthur. It's meant to be elegant. It is elegant, Ella, which is precisely why Margaret doesn't understand it. He patted her arm, a rare gesture of affection. Do not let them grind you down. Tonight is your triumph. You've raised more for this foundation in 5 years than my family did in the previous 50. He walked away, leaving Ella to shore up her defenses. He was right. Tonight was important. Later, in her cavernous dressing room, she looked at the gown she had chosen. It was a deep, elegant navy silk, by a designer no one would recognize. It was modest, with long sleeves and a simple boat neck. It was a dress meant to blend in. A hostess dress. A text buzzed on her vanity. It was Jonas, who hadn't been home in 2 days. Running late. Don't wait up. Make sure the crystal is cold. She stared at the message, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. He hadn't said where he was. He hadn't asked how the preparations were. He had just given an order. She took a deep breath, fastened the clasp of her locket, and went downstairs to face the lions. The first guests arrived, as they always did, precisely at 7 o'clock. Rolls-Royce and Bentley doors were opened by valets as a river of old money and new ambition flowed into the Blackwood estate. Senator Harrison, the Barclays, the Sterling family, names that graced bank buildings and hospital wings, all greeted Ella with practiced smiles. Ella, darling, you've outdone yourself again. The grounds are breathtaking, simply marvelous. Ella was the perfect hostess. She smiled, she nodded, she deflected, she complimented. She moved through the crowd like a phantom, her navy dress a shadow among the glittering sequins and bright silks of the other women. Her mother-in-law Margaret was holding court by the grand piano, wearing a gaudy feathered Chanel piece that looked, as Arthur had whispered to Ella, like an ostrich in a fist fight. Ella had just finished a conversation with a museum curator when the air in the grand hall shifted. The ambient chatter dropped by several decibels, replaced by a new, focused intensity. Ella turned. Jonas had arrived, and he was not alone. He stood in the grand entryway, his tuxedo impeccable, a smug, possessive smile on his face. On his arm, practically fused to his side, was a woman who was the antithesis of Ella. Her name was Selena. Ella knew this, just as everyone in their social circle knew. She was a model or an influencer, some vaguely modern profession that required an immense amount of self-promotion. Tonight, Selena was not just promoting herself. She was declaring victory. She was poured into a dress of scalding, fire engine red. It was cut so low it was a miracle of engineering, and it was slit so high that it left nothing to the imagination. Around her neck was a spray of diamonds that Ella recognized with a sickening lurch. The Cartier necklace Jonas had claimed he was buying for an investor's wife last Christmas. They were a stop-motion photograph of audacity. Jonas, the prince, presenting his new, shiny conquest. Selena, the victor, her eyes scanning the room as if measuring for new curtains. Ella felt the blood drain from her face. It was one thing to know about the affair. It was another for Jonas to bring his mistress to the family's most public event, to their home. She felt hundreds of eyes pivot to her. They watched her for a reaction, for a crack, for the mask to slip. This was not just an affair. It was a public execution. Ella took one, single, shuddering breath. She steadied her hands. Then she did the one thing they didn't expect. She walked towards them, As she crossed the 30 feet of marble, a path parted for her. The silence was absolute. She could hear the click of Selina's stiletto heels on the floor. She stopped a respectable distance in front of them. Jonas's smile faltered, replaced by a look of annoyance. "Jonas, you're late," Ella said, her voice impossibly calm, cool and clear. Selina let out a high-pitched, silvery laugh, designed to grate. "Oh, honey, he's not late. He's just arrived. There's a difference." She thrust her hand out to Ella, the Cartier diamonds on her wrist flashing. "I'm Selina Vance. You must be the party planner. You've done a darling job. It's all very quaint." The insult was deliberate, designed to reframe Ella as staff. Ella did not take her hand. She kept her eyes locked on her husband. "Jonas, your parents are by the piano. I'm sure your mother is anxious to greet your guest." Jonas, ever the coward, just shrugged. "Sena, come on. I'll get you a drink." He steered her away, past the staring guests, leaving Ella standing alone in the center of the vast hall. As Selina passed, she looked back over her shoulder, a cruel, triumphant smirk playing on her surgically perfect lips. Ella stood for a moment, absorbing the impact. She had been stripped, flayed, and humiliated in her own home. She saw her friend, Chloe, a fellow board member, start to move towards her, her face a mask of rage. Ella put up a single, trembling hand to stop her. "Not yet. Maintain composure." She turned and walked toward the terrace, her back straight, every step an agony. She didn't see Arthur Blackwood, standing in the shadow of the grand staircase, watching his son's monstrous display. His face was not angry. It was something far more terrifying. It was an expression of finality, as if he had just watched a judge's gavel fall. The party, inevitably, resumed. The orchestra, sensing the tension, struck up a lively Vivaldi piece, and the buzz of conversation returned, now more fervent and laced with venomous gossip. The sharks had smelled blood in the water. Ella, however, was a Blackwood. Or at least, she wore the name. She could not fall apart. She retreated to the gardens where the marquee glowed and focused on her duties. She spoke to the catering captain. She checked on the auction items. She smiled at guests, her face an aching mask of porcelain. But Selina was not content with a single dramatic entrance. She was on a mission. Ella was discussing a donation with Senator Harrison when Selina glided up, champagne flute in hand, already on her third. "Excuse me, Senator. I must steal Jonas's wife," she purred, emphasizing the word with a sarcastic drawl. "Duty calls." The senator, uncomfortable, excused himself. Selina leaned in, her perfume, a heavy, cloying scent, washing over Ella. "Darling, the champagne. It's simply not cold enough. I mean, it's not bad, if you're used to drinking Prosecco from a can. But Jonas is used to the best." "We are? Could you fix that?" She didn't wait for an answer, just tapped her empty flute against Ella's arm before sashaying away. It was a power play, small and petty, but effective. She was treating the lady of the house like a waitress. Ella's friend, Chloe, who had been watching from a few feet away, marched over. "Ella, you cannot let her do that. That creature just ordered you to get her a drink. Are you going to let that stand?" "What am I supposed to do, Chloe?" Ella whispered, her voice raw. "'Cause a scene? This gala will raise $500,000 for the pediatric wing. I will not jeopardize that because my husband is who he is. So you're just going to take it? You're going to let that harlot in a red dress wipe her feet all over you?" "I am going to endure," Ella said, her jaw tight. "I am going to finish this night, and then I am going to finish this." Chloe was taken aback by the steel in her friend's voice. "What do you mean?" Before Ella could answer, the next assault began. Jonas and Selina had taken over the main fountain area, a spot usually reserved for the guest of honor. Jonas, fueled by alcohol and Selina's fawning, was laughing loudly, holding her by the waist. Ella was supervising the opening of the silent auction tables nearby. Selina spotted her and called out, her voice carrying across the lawn. "Oh, Ella, there you are! We were just talking about the decor." A hush fell over the guests in the immediate vicinity. "I was just telling Jonas," Selina continued, walking toward Ella, her hips swaying, "that this entire setup is so drab. It's old, it's dusty, it's like a museum no one wants to visit." She reached out and ran a finger along one of the stone statues. "It needs a complete overhaul, a new vision. Something younger, hotter, fresher." She looked pointedly at Ella's simple navy dress and then down at her own revealing red one. The implication was clear. She wasn't just talking about the house. Jonas, standing behind her, just smirked and drank his whiskey. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching his wife be torn apart by his mistress. Ella felt a cold, hard rage begin to build beneath the ice of her composure. This was her home. She had poured her soul into this foundation, into this event, into making something good out of the empty, hollow name of Blackwood. "The theme is classic elegance, Selina," Ella said, her voice dangerously quiet. "It's meant to honor the foundation's history, something you clearly know nothing about." Selina's smile faltered for a second, surprised by the clapback, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, history," she scoffed. "History is just what people do when they can't create a future. And trust me, honey, your history here is, well, it's over." She turned to Jonas, pouting. "Jules, baby, I'm bored. This is so stuffy. Let's go to the city. Let's go to One Oak. Let's go live." "We will, baby, we will," Jonas said, placating her. He shot a dark look at Ella. "Stop being so difficult, Ella. Be nice to our guest." Our guest. The final, definitive severing. Ella was no longer his wife. She was the hostess, and Selina was the guest of honor. Throughout this all, Arthur Blackwood was circulating, speaking quietly to his old money contemporaries. He never once looked at the drama unfolding by the fountain. He talked about the stock market with David Sterling. He discussed art with the Barclays. He seemed utterly, completely oblivious. And that, more than anything, is what broke Ella's heart. She had thought, foolishly, that he was her ally. But tonight, it seemed, she was truly, completely alone. The night wore on. The auction was a success, despite the toxic undercurrent. Ella had managed to avoid both Jonas and Selina for nearly an hour, finding refuge in the logistics, coordinating the flow of the live auction from a small alcove near the main stage. But Selina was a predator, and she wasn't finished with her prey. She found Ella as she was reviewing the final pledge numbers with the event coordinator. This time, Selina wasn't just tipsy. She was drunk, her voice louder, her movements more erratic. "Well, well, well," Selina slurred, leaning against a marble pillar. "Look at her. The little worker bee, still buzzing around." Mark, the coordinator, looked at Ella, terrified. Ella gave him a nod. "It's all right, Mark. Thank you. I'll take it from here." Mark fled. Ella turned to face Selina, her patience gone, replaced by a cold, weary exhaustion. "What do you want, Selina?" "What do I want?" Selina laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "I want you to stop pretending." She pushed off the pillar and staggered closer, her red dress now looking cheap and wrinkled under the harsh light. She was close enough that Ella could smell the stale champagne on her breath. "You walk around here with your little clipboard and your sad little bun, acting like you're the queen. You're not. You're a placeholder, a warm body, a nanny for the old man. You are drunk, Ella said flatly. You should go home. Oh, I am home, baby, Selina hissed, her eyes narrowing. Or I will be, as soon as the trash is taken out. She was speaking loudly now. The orchestra had just finished a piece, and in the resulting quiet, her voice, amplified by rage and alcohol, carried across the entire marquee. The remaining guests, the most important, the wealthiest, all turned. Jonas, who had been at the bar, started to walk over, a look of mild annoyance on his face, as if his pet tiger were misbehaving. Selina saw the audience. She grew taller. This was her moment. This was the coup de grace. She pointed a long, scarlet-nailed finger directly at Ella's chest. You know what you are, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. You're a charity case. Jonas's little charity project. He felt sorry for you in your little library, with your little cardigans and your sad, empty life. Ella stood, rooted to the spot, her face pale. She could feel the stares of Senator Harrison, of the Barclays, of every person she had worked with for 5 years. He's done feeling sorry for you, Selina sneered. Now he wants a woman. He wants me. And you? You can go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. She grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter's tray and downed half of it. You know, you're a wonderful party planner, Ella. I'll give you that. You've been planning this whole party like it's your job. Because it is. It's all you're good for. She took a step closer until her face was inches from Ella's. You're not the lady of the house, she whispered, just loud enough for the first few rows of people to hear. You are just a servant. Silence. Absolute, crushing, profound silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the generator and Selina's own ragged breathing. Ella's eyes filled with tears, hot and sudden. She had endured the affair, the neglect, the coldness, but this public branding in front of everyone, it shattered her. Jonas finally arrived, grabbing Selina's arm. Sena, okay, that's enough. You're making a scene. I'm telling the truth, she shrieked, ripping her arm away from him. Look at her. She's just the help. She's nothing. And I'm going to be the new Mrs. Blackwood. Tell her, Jonas. Tell her. Jonas, for the first time, looked trapped. He looked at Ella's tear-streaked, devastated face. He looked at the 100 horrified, judgmental faces of his peers. He looked at Selina, her face a mask of triumphant, ugly hate. Ella closed her eyes. The mask was broken. The shield was down. She was defeated. And then, clap, 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 a slow, deliberate, amplified sound. Every head turned. Walking from the main house onto the stage, a microphone in his hand, was Arthur Blackwood. He was not looking at Jonas or Selina. He was looking right at Ella, and his face was a mask of cold, righteous fury. Bravo! Bravo! Arthur Blackwood's voice, amplified by the sound system, cut through the stunned silence like a surgeon's scalpel. The sound operators, thinking this was part of the program, had put a spotlight on him. He stood on the raised dais, a figure of absolute authority. What a performance, he continued, his voice dangerously smooth. He walked to the edge of the stage, looking down on the 3 people at the center of the drama. Selina, still drunk, seemed to think he was applauding her. She smiled, a smug, wobbly expression. Thank you, Arthur. It's about time someone spoke the truth. Quiet, child, Arthur snapped, and the voice was so sudden, so cold, it made Selina physically flinch. The smile vanished. Arthur's gaze swept over the crowd. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Senator, David, Mrs. Barclay, you came here tonight to support a wonderful cause. You did not come here to witness a domestic disturbance. and for that I apologize." He looked down at his son. "Jonas." "Father," Jonas said, his voice strained. He was no longer the smug prince. He was a schoolboy, caught. "Father, this is just a misunderstanding. Saina's had a little too much to drink." "You will not speak," Arthur commanded. "You have done enough speaking for a lifetime." He turned his attention, his full, undivided attention, to Selina. She visibly shrank. "Miss Vance, is it?" he asked, as if he hadn't heard her name a dozen times. "It's Selina," she said, her voice small. "Miss Vance," Arthur continued, ignoring her. "You came into my home tonight. A home built by my grandfather, not by my son. A home you were not invited to." "Jonas invited me," she protested. "Jonas," Arthur said, a cruel smile playing on his lips, "is also a guest here. A guest who has clearly and disastrously overstayed his welcome." The crowd murmured. This was no longer just a cheating scandal. This was something else. "You stand here," Arthur said, his voice rising, "in a dress bought with my family's money, wearing diamonds bought with my family's money, and you have the audacity to insult the one person in this entire family who has any grace, any dignity, any worth." He was moving now, descending the small steps from the stage, walking slowly toward the tableau. "You called Ella, a servant," Arthur said, his voice laced with a deep, profound sadness. "You stand in this marquee, which she arranged. You ate the food, which she selected. You bid in the auction, which she procured, and you call her the servant?" He stopped directly in front of Selina, who was now pale and trembling. "You have made a catastrophic and very public miscalculation, young lady," Arthur said softly. "You see, you assumed that because my son is a weak, faithless, and utterly predictable fool, that I am too." He then looked past her, past Jonas, to Ella, who was watching him, her face a mask of tear-streaked confusion. "Ella, my dear," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "For 5 years, you have been the one and only Blackwood in this house. You have been its keeper, its conscience, its heart." He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out not a handkerchief, but a long, folded set of documents, bound by a simple paperclip. Jonas's eyes widened. "Father, what is that? What are you doing?" "I'm correcting a mistake, Jonas," Arthur said. "A mistake I made 35 years ago, when I decided you were fit to carry my name." He turned back to Ella, and his next words stopped the heart of every person listening. "Selina is right about one thing," Arthur announced, his voice booming again. "There is a servant in our midst." He looked at Jonas. "And there is the lady of the house." He looked at Ella, but they seemed to have confused the two. He held out the papers. Ella looked at the papers, then at Arthur, confused. She didn't move. "Go on, my dear," Arthur urged, his voice gentle. "Take it." Slowly, hesitantly, Ella reached out and took the folded documents. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them. She looked down and read the first line. It was a legal document. A deed transfer. "Father, what is this?" Jonas all but shouted, panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. "This is not funny. The party is over. Everyone, go home." "No one is going anywhere," Arthur barked, "and you will not give orders in this house again." He turned back to the crowd. "You see, my son, like many men who are given everything, believes he earned it. He believes this house, Willow Creek, is his. He believes the company is his. He believes the name is his." Arthur shook his head. "An unfortunate assumption. I am, as many of you know, a very careful man. I am not, as it turns out, a very trusting one, especially not of my own blood. He pointed to the papers in Ella's hand. Jonas, Arthur said, you seem to have forgotten. You don't own this house. You never did. I do. It was part of my personal trust, not the family fund you've been so busy embezzling. Jonas went white. Embezzling? I was borrowing. You were stealing, Arthur snapped, and I have the bank records to prove it, which brings me to this. He looked at Ella. Ella, you are a good, decent woman. You are a brilliant administrator. You have run this foundation with integrity and skill, and I cannot, stand by and watch my fool of a son and his prostitute throw you out of the life you built. Jonas, Selina whispered, her voice panicked. What is he talking about? Arthur smiled. He's talking about this, Miss Vance. That document, Ella, is the deed to the Willow Creek estate. All 300 acres. The house, the art, the stables, everything. I filed it with the state of Connecticut this morning at 9 a.m. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. It is, as of 9 o'clock this morning, in your name. Solely. Exclusively. It is part of an ironclad, irrevocable trust that not even I can break. It is yours, Ella, completely and totally. The silence that followed was so profound, it was almost violent. Ella just stared at the paper. Jonas's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Selina was the first to speak. You gave her the house? You gave the servant the house? Precisely, Arthur said, beaming. I gave the lady of the house her house. I find it a fitting reward for 5 years of service, wouldn't you agree? You can't do this, Jonas finally roared, lunging at his father. I'll sue you. I'll have you declared incompetent. This is my birthright. 2 security guards, who had been on Arthur's personal payroll for years and were loyal only to him, intercepted Jonas before he got within 5 feet, grabbing his arms. Your birthright? Arthur scoffed. Your birthright was a good name, which you destroyed. It was a world-class education, which you wasted. And it was a loving, brilliant wife, which you... Well, he gestured to Selina. Ella, Arthur said, turning to her, his eyes warm. You are the mistress of this house, legally, morally, finally. He looked at the security guards holding his sputtering, enraged son. Then he looked at Selina, who seemed to have been frozen in place, her mind unable to process this reversal of fortune. My dear, Arthur said to Ella, a small, wicked smile on his face. Your first official duty. What do you want to do with the help? Ella looked up. Her tears were gone. Her face, which had been a mask of pain, was now hardening into something else. Something new. Something strong. She looked at Jonas, his face purple with rage, held by security. She looked at Selina, her red dress a garish joke, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. She looked at the paper in her hand. The deed. Her freedom. Her power. She took a deep breath. Ella looked at the paper in her hands. Not just a deed, but a key, a weapon, and a shield, all in one. She felt the weight of it, the dense, fibrous reality of the paper. She had been so empty, so hollowed out, and now, in an instant, Arthur had filled her back up with power. She looked up, her gaze bypassing Jonas, and landed directly on Selina. You're right, Ella said, her voice clear and carrying. No microphone needed. The entire crowd leaned in. I am a servant. I have been serving this family. I've been serving this foundation. And I've been serving a man who was not worthy of my time. She then turned to her husband, who was still struggling in the guard's grip. Jonas, she said, and his name was a cold, sharp icicle. "You brought this person, into my home. It's my home!" He spat, his face contorted. "My father is insane. It's my home." "Not anymore," Ella said simply. She held up the deed. "It's mine." She took a step toward Selina, who instinctively took a step back. "As the owner of this property," Ella said, relishing the words, "I am exercising my right to have uninvited guests removed." She looked at the two security guards. "Gentlemen, Miss Vance is trespassing. Please escort her off the property." "What? No, you can't!" Selina shrieked. "Jonas, do something!" Jonas just thrashed against the guards. "This is illegal. Ella, you bitch! You planned this!" "No," a new voice said. It was Mr. Harrison, the Blackwood family's long-time attorney, who had been standing quietly by the bar, nursing a single glass of water all night. He stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "I can assure you, Mr. Blackwood," he said to Jonas, "it is all perfectly legal. I drew up the trust documents myself, per your father's instructions. They are, as he said, ironclad. The transfer is final." Selina's face crumpled. This was not a joke. This was real. "Please," she whimpered, her entire demeanor changing from predator to pathetic prey. "Ella, Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," Ella said, her voice devoid of pity. "You meant every word. You just miscalculated the outcome." The guards, one now free from Jonas, took Selina's arm. She didn't fight. She was sobbing, mascara and broken dreams running down her face. "Jonas, don't let them. I love you." Jonas, however, was in his own private hell. He had stopped fighting and was just staring, mute at his father. "As for you," Ella said to Jonas, "you are not a guest. You are my husband. For now." She turned to Arthur. "Arthur, please, let him go." Arthur nodded. The guard released Jonas, who stumbled, straightening his ruined tuxedo. He looked at Ella, his eyes full of a hatred, so pure it was terrifying. "You will pay for this, Ella," he hissed. "No, Jonas, I'm done paying," she replied. She turned to the remaining guests. "I believe my father-in-law is right. The party is over. Thank you all for your generous donations. We will mail you the final tallies. Good night." It was a dismissal. The guests, thrilled and horrified, began to file out in a silent, stunned exodus. It was the most talked-about exit in Greenwich history. Within 10 minutes, the marquee was empty. All that remained was Ella, Arthur, Jonas, and the debris of 1,000 broken champagne glasses. Jonas started toward the house. "Where are you going?" Ella asked. "I'm going to my room," he spat. "No," Ella said. "You're not. You don't have a room here. You can pack a bag. 1. You have 10 minutes. Then you will leave my property." "Ella," he roared, "you can't throw me out. I'm your husband." "And that," Ella said, "is the real twist." She walked over to the table where she'd left her own purse. She pulled out a similar-looking manila folder, though hers was crumpled and tear-stained. She threw it at his chest. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "Those," Ella said, "are divorce papers. I had my lawyer draw them up 3 weeks ago. I was, foolishly, waiting until after the gala to serve them. I wanted to do this quietly, respectfully." She laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You and her taught me that respect is a currency I can no longer afford." Jonas was stunned. You were leaving me?" "Of course I was," Ella said. "Did you think I was going to be your mother's punching bag and your personal doormat forever?" Now it was Arthur's turn to be stunned. He looked from the papers in Jonas's hand to the deed in Ella's. He suddenly burst into a deep, rolling laugh. "My God," Arthur said, wiping a tear from his eye. "I knew you were brilliant, Ella. I had no idea." You didn't know?" Ella asked. "No," Arthur said. I thought I was saving you. I thought you were trapped, and I was giving you the castle so you'd have the power to kick him out. I've been planning this for 6 months, ever since I saw the first credit card bill for that Cartier monstrosity." "And I," Ella said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "was planning on taking half of his holdings in the divorce, which I knew would be a long, ugly fight. I was going to use the money to start a new foundation, one without the Blackwood name." They looked at each other. Two master tacticians who had accidentally coordinated a pincer movement. Jonas looked between his wife, who had been planning to leave him, and his father, who had just disinherited him. He was a man with nothing, no house, no wife, and as he was about to find out, no money. "Oh, and Jonas," Arthur said, a final, cold blade. "About those embezzled funds. Mr. Harrison has already filed the paperwork. As of Monday morning, you are removed from the board, your accounts are frozen, and you are officially cut off." Jonas looked at his father. He looked at his wife. He said nothing. He just turned, defeated, and walked out of the marquee, across the lawn, and down the long, dark driveway. They watched him go, a single, pathetic figure, until he was swallowed by the night. The aftermath of the gala was not a quiet wave, but a legal tsunami. The very next Monday, Ella was served with a barrage of legal notices. Jonas, with his mother, Margaret's financial backing, had hired one of the most ruthless and expensive legal teams in New York, led by a man named Harrison Kincaid, known in his circles as the Shark. Their claim was explosive. Ella Sanchez Blackwood, a woman of no means, had enacted undue influence on an elderly and mentally fragile Arthur Blackwood, coercing him into signing over the family's primary asset. They filed motions to have Arthur declared mentally incompetent and to have the deed transfer frozen and reversed. The Greenwich Society pages, which had feasted on the gossip of the gala, now had a legal war to report. A preliminary hearing was set. Not in a courtroom, but in the sterile, high-rise conference room of Kincaid's Manhattan law firm. The air was thick with tension. On one side of the vast, polished mahogany table sat Jonas, looking pale and vibrating with rage. Margaret, dressed in funereal black, looking as if she'd swallowed a wasp. And Kincaid, all sharp angles and predatory confidence. On the other side sat Ella, poised and calm in a simple navy business suit. Beside her was Arthur, looking not remotely fragile, but rather bored, and next to him was their family attorney, the quiet, unassuming Mr. Harrison. "Let's be blunt," Kincaid began, his voice a smooth, confident purr. "My clients are prepared to take this to a jury. We have a dozen sworn affidavits from long-time family friends and staff attesting to Mr. Blackwood's eccentricities in recent months. We have testimony that Mrs. Blackwood—" "Miss Sanchez Blackwood, actually," Ella said, her voice quiet but cutting through the room. "We are, after all, in the middle of a divorce. I'd like to keep the names clear." Kincaid's smile tightened. "Ms. Sanchez Blackwood, then. We have testimony that you systematically isolated Arthur from his family, that you poisoned him against his only son, and that you timed this heist for a moment of maximum emotional distress. A jury will see a classic, textbook case of elder manipulation, a gold digger, plain and simple." Margaret nodded vigorously. "She was a librarian. She came here with nothing." Ella sat back, her hands folded. Arthur, who had been examining a spot on the ceiling, finally spoke. "Are you finished, Mr. Kincaid?" he asked, his voice polite. "I am merely laying out the facts," Kincaid said. "No," Arthur countered. "You are laying out a narrative, A feeble one. My turn. He nodded to Mr. Harrison. The old lawyer, with a small, almost apologetic smile, slid a single 3-inch thick binder across the table. It landed in front of Kincaid with a heavy, definitive thud. "What is this?" Kincaid asked, his bravado faltering for the first time. "That," Arthur said, "is my narrative, and unlike yours, it has the virtue of being true, and more importantly, provable." Kincaid opened the binder. Jonas, craning his neck, saw the first page, and his blood ran cold. It was a bank-to-bank wire transfer receipt. "You see, Kincaid," Arthur continued, "while you were collecting attestations about my eccentricities, I was having a forensic audit conducted. That binder contains a complete record of the last 3 years of Jonas's management of the Foundation's endowment. Or, as the district attorney will call it, embezzlement." Margaret let out a small, strangled gasp. "It details," Arthur said, his voice a cold monotone, "the $1.8 million he borrowed to cover his personal stock market losses, the Cayman Islands account, the Selena Fund, as he so cleverly named it, which he used to pay for his mistress's rent, her car, and, of course, that rather lovely Cartier necklace. It details the wire fraud, the tax evasion, the myriad ways he has been stealing from this family and from the children's hospital for half a decade." Kincaid was no longer speaking. He was just reading, his face growing paler. He was a shark, but he knew what a nuclear bomb looked like. "So here is my offer," Arthur said, leaning forward. "You can take this to a jury, by all means, and I will in turn hand this binder over to my very good friend, the DA. I will have Jonas's assets frozen by the end of the day. He won't just be poor, he will be imprisoned. We are talking 10 to 15 years, minimum." Jonas was ashen. "Father, you wouldn't—" "You tried to have me declared senile, boy," Arthur spat, his mask of boredom gone, replaced by a cold fire. "You stood by and let that creature humiliate the one person in this family with any decency. Wouldn't is no longer in my vocabulary." He settled back in his chair. "Or, there is option 2. Mr. Harrison has the papers." Harrison slid a second, much thinner folder across the table. "You and your mother will drop every single lawsuit. You will sign the divorce papers as they are written, making no contest and no claim on any of Ella's assets, present or future. You will formally abdicate your position on the foundation board. You will, in effect, cease to be a Blackwood in any legal or financial sense. You will walk away." "And," Jonas croaked, his voice barely a whisper, "and," Arthur said, "in exchange for your complete and total disappearance from our lives, I will not have my only son arrested, and I will deposit $1 million into an account of your choosing. It is not an inheritance. It is a severance package for a lifetime of profound disappointment. You have 1 hour." Kincaid looked at his client. "Jonas, sign the papers." Jonas, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen, signed. Margaret was weeping, a dry, ugly, soundless cry. The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. Jonas, true to his word, disappeared. The last Ella heard, he and Selena had taken the $1 million, which Arthur, as a final twist of the knife, had put into a trust that paid out in monthly increments, and moved to a high-rise condo in Aventura, Florida. Their relationship, built on the thrill of shared conquest, quickly soured when faced with the banality of a budget. The Miami society pages, a far cry from Greenwich, occasionally reported on their screaming matches in public. Margaret, having lost her son, her status, and her access to the main Blackwood accounts, retreated to the summer cottage in Palm Beach, a place she had always despised as common. She sent one final vitriolic email to Ella. "I hope you are lonely in that big, empty house, Ella. I hope it crushes you." Ella read the email, deleted it, and went back to work. She was not lonely, and she was not being crushed. She was liberating. For the first week, she simply walked the halls, absorbing the silence. It was no longer the silence of dread, but the silence of peace. Arthur had taken up permanent residence in the guest wing, and their mornings became a new, cherished ritual. They would meet in the breakfast nook, not the cavernous dining room, drinking coffee from simple ceramic mugs, not fine china. They would pore over spreadsheets and blueprints. "Jonas's trophy room," Arthur mused one morning, looking at a design. He filled it with the stuffed heads of animals he never shot. So tacky. "It has good bones," Ella said, tapping the plan. "And wonderful light. It's going to be the heart of the new library." The first thing Ella did was purge the house, the heavy, oppressive furniture, the dark, brooding portraits, including a 10-foot-tall monstrosity of Jonas on a polo horse, the gaudy, feathered decor Margaret had insisted upon. It was all auctioned off. The proceeds went directly into their new fund, and it was a new fund. At their first board meeting, now comprised of Chloe, Arthur, and 2 new, sharp-minded community leaders, Ella made her first proclamation. "The Blackwood Foundation is officially dissolved," she announced. "In its place, we are incorporating the Willow Creek Fund. Our mission is no longer about throwing one large, self-congratulatory party a year. It's about direct, daily impact. The Gala Fund is being liquidated. Its first project will be the Willow Creek Community Library." She was not just redecorating. She was exorcising. She brought in light, painting the morose blue walls a warm, creamy white. She filled the halls with modern, vibrant art. She turned the grand, intimidating ballroom into a public meeting space. She was, piece by piece, turning a cold monument into a warm, breathing home. 6 months later, it was a warm spring evening. The grand opening of the Willow Creek Community Library was a quiet, local affair. The former trophy room was unrecognizable. Its vast windows, once hidden by heavy velvet, streamed golden sunlight onto rows of books. Children sat on colorful rugs, and local residents browsed the computer terminals. Ella was in the center of it all, not as a hostess in silk, but as a librarian in jeans and a simple linen shirt. Her hair was in a messy, practical bun, but this one was of her own choosing. She was on her knees, reading "Where the Wild Things Are" to a rapt group of children, her voice animated, her face split in a genuine, joyous smile. Watching from the doorway stood Arthur and Chloe. "Well," Chloe said, sipping a plastic cup of lemonade. She finally got rid of the drab. "She's a marvel," Arthur said, his voice thick with a pride he had never once felt for his own son. "I thought I was giving her a fortress to hide in, but she turned it into a beacon." Later that evening, after the last child had left, Ella sat on the grand terrace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in that same fiery red from the night of the gala. But now, it was not a warning. It was a promise. She heard footsteps, and Arthur joined her, handing her a glass of white wine. He, in turn, was nursing his usual brandy. "A good day, Ella," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "A very good day, Arthur." They sat in companionable silence. "I heard from Margaret," Arthur said casually. "She's bored in Palm Beach. She has decided that perhaps she was too hasty and would like to reconnect, now that she's realized her monthly allowance is tied directly to my continued good health and mood." "And what did you say?" Ella asked, a small smile playing on her lips. I told her I'd send a Christmas card. If I remember, he grunted. They shared a small laugh. Ella was holding something in her hand, rubbing it between her thumb and forefinger. It was the small, simple silver locket. "You never wear that anymore," Arthur noted. "No," Ella said, her voice soft. "I don't need to." She opened it. The tiny, faded photo of the young, hopeful librarian she had been stared back. This was my mother's. I wore it for protection. It was my armor, a reminder of who I was, where I came from, to keep me humble. "There is nothing wrong with being humble, my dear," Arthur said. "No," Ella agreed. "But there is a vast difference between being humble and being humbled. I was humbled, daily, in this house. I wore this to remind myself that there was a me separate from the Mrs. Blackwood they treated like staff. It was a shield." She looked at the small, earnest face in the photo. "I don't need a shield anymore, Arthur. I've become the fortress." She didn't throw the locket. That would have been too dramatic, too wasteful. She simply set it down on the table beside her. A relic. A memento of a war she had, quite definitively, won. "So," Arthur said, taking a sip of his brandy, "the house is yours. The foundation is thriving. The library is open. Jonas is a bad memory, and Margaret is a punchline. What on earth will you do now, Ella?" Ella looked out over the 300 acres that were hers. The gardens, no longer a prison, but a sanctuary. The trees, their leaves rustling in the gentle night breeze, the warm, glowing lights from her library in the distance. She took a deep, clean breath, the first one in 5 years. "I think," she said, a slow, radiant smile spreading across her face, "I'll do what I've always wanted to do." "And what's that?" She turned to him, her eyes clear and bright in the twilight. "Live. I think I'll just live. Not as a servant, not as a wife, not even as a survivor, but as the lady of the house. On my own terms." Arthur raised his glass. "To the lady of the house." Ella raised hers, the crystal ringing clear in the quiet night air. "To the lady of the house." And just like that, the woman they called a servant became the master of it all. Ella's story isn't just about revenge. It's about worth. It's about endurance. It's about the moment you stop accepting the role you've been given and start taking the power you deserve. Jonas and Selena thought they could just erase her, but they forgot one thing. A woman who has built her life on quiet strength has foundations they can't possibly understand. What did you think of Arthur's ultimate power move? Were you cheering for Ella when she finally found her voice? Let me know in the comments what your favorite part of this story was. If you loved this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And of course, subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story. We have new ones coming every single week. Thanks for listening.